Hello, this is Charles Brewer, President of the Civil War Study Group here at Lake of the Woods, Virginia. Welcome to the recording of our program on February 28th, 2025.
This morning's presenter is Mr. Tim Talbott with the Central Virginia Battlefields Trust. I'll introduce him fully in just a moment, but we have a little bonus presentation too. Mr. Jim Logan, one of the residents here at Lake of the Woods. Where are you, Jim? I got there. Okay, back over here. Is going to offer us just a little bit of information about an ancestor who he just, am I right, last night discovered is not his uncle, great uncle, but his great grandfather. Okay. A Medal of Honor winner. And he has brought some artifacts that belong to or represent the life of that gentleman. Okay, whose name is he was Major Joseph Franklin Carter. Okay, who received the Medal of Honor for his aid in the defense of Fort Stedman. Right at the end of the siege of Petersburg in 1865. Anyway, so let me return for a moment to our main presenter today. As I say, Mr. Tim Talbott. I'm pleased to introduce him as well. We're sort of featuring Medal of Honor winners. His presentation centers around the action of 14 Medal of Honor winners, award recipients, I should say, from the United States colored troops at the Battle of Newmarket Heights near Richmond, Virginia. Okay. So anyway, Tim is the Chief Administrative Officer of the Central Virginia Battlefields Trust, which is dedicated to the preservation of dirt and grass. That's their slogan, and they are the premier preservation organization in Central Virginia, and they've done a great deal for the battlefields in our area. Okay, so it's also true that the Central Virginia Battlefields Trust is one of the organizations that has stood as a member of the Battlefield Coalition against the massive development, the wilderness crossing development that is planned across Route 3 to the east or north of Lake of the Woods. So the organization is doing all it can to preserve the battlefields in our area again. Okay. Well, Tim's presentation today will detail the heroism and contributions of the United States colored troops at the September 1864 Battle of Newmarket Heights, where some 14 black soldiers received the Medal of Honor for their courageous actions. The title of Tim's presentation is Making a More Perfect Union, and tells the life story of some of the 14 black soldiers who received the Medal of Honor for their courageous actions at Newmarket Heights, east of Richmond. Tim is, in fact, the president and founder of the Battle of Newmarket Heights Memorial and Education Association, and he holds degrees from Milligan and East Tennessee State Universities and a master's from in public history from Appalachian State University. And by the way, among other things, Tim has contributed some stunning articles in the monthly newsletters of the CVBT, among them covering such wide variety of topics as witness trees, battlefield ordnance of the Civil War, and the medical care of Civil War wounded. At any rate, we're very pleased to have Tim with us this morning, and I'll turn things over to him right now.
Well, thank you, Jack, for that kind introduction. Thank you guys for coming out today. I do like to give a little bit of a disclaimer before I start my talk on Newmarket Heights. When people hear Newmarket, they often get confused with the battle that happened in the Shenandoah Valley about 4 months before the Battle of Newmarket, which was very famous for the VMI cadets, former Vice President, now General John C. Breckinridge, Franz Sigel, and all that's happening over there. But this is a totally different battle. This is part of the Petersburg campaign, 9.5 months fighting around Petersburg and Richmond, trying to capture that very important transportation nexus at Petersburg. And historians have typically historically broken down the Petersburg campaign into 9 separate offensives that General Grant tries in an effort to capture Petersburg. And this is going to be the 5th offensive, which is going to occur in September of 1864. And starting with the 3rd offensive, which is most famously known as the Battle of the Crater, Grant tries movements north of the James to draw troops, Confederate troops, away from Petersburg, and then makes an effort at Petersburg. He does that the 3rd offensive, the 4th offensive, the 5th offensive, and even the 6th offensive after this. So this is going to be a battle or fight in where Grant's trying to pull troops away from Petersburg so he can make moves and cut more railroads and wagon roads that are supplying Petersburg. And that just gives you a little bit of background on the battle, because I'm not going to really focus much on this talk on the battle at all. This is more about the men who did the fighting at Newmarket Heights. Newmarket Heights is part of a 2-pronged effort on September 29, 1864. It's going to involve the 18th Corps of the Army of the James. There are 3 divisions in the 18th Corps. 2 divisions are white divisions. They're going to attack a position near there, about 3 miles away, called Fort Harrison. The 3rd division is an African American or United States Colored Troop division, and they are going to attack Newmarket Heights, which is a position that's being defended by about 1,800 to 2,000 Confederate soldiers in the Texas Brigade, as well as some South Carolinian and Virginians who are fighting as dismounted cavalry. This position is very strong that they're attacking, and they've got several, what the Confederates, or we would call today in modern military terms, force multipliers. The Confederates have established 2 lines of abattis, which are battlefield obstructions trying to slow down the attack. They're fighting behind earthworks. They've got a signal tower behind them to tell them where to concentrate their troops. And then they also have artillery on either flank of their line. So they've got all these, we call them force multipliers in modern military terms, but they've got all these obstacles these black troops do to try to take this position. So the work that's cut out for them is very, very tough road to hoe, as you might say in farmers' terms. And that just is hopefully to explain what these guys are doing. Will maybe be a little bit more impressive to you when you know what they're having to endure. So the black soldiers who fought at the Battle of Newmarket Heights have amazing individual stories that have unfortunately remained overshadowed for generations for many different reasons. However, now that the Battle of Newmarket Heights is finally getting its proper due consideration, thanks in due part to recent scholarship, along with a reappraisal of historical records that are still being discovered, we are finally getting a firmer grasp on the fascinating lives that these men led before, during, and after their Civil War service. These men came from diverse backgrounds. Their service records tell us that they were born in many different places, including Texas, Ohio, Illinois, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Delaware, Alabama, Kentucky, Tennessee, Washington, D.C., Canada, and many others. Some soldiers that fought at Newmarket Heights came from enslaved backgrounds and thus performed a wide array of work and jobs while in bondage. Those who were free before enlisting held numerous different occupations too. Among these men were farmers, barbers, waiters, miners, sailors, cooks, teamsters, shoemakers, bricklayers, carpenters, porters, butchers, blacksmiths, boatmen, coopers, plasterers, general laborers, firemen, and many, many others. But before we dive into 7 of these individual soldiers' stories, let's take a minute to consider their motivations for enlisting and fighting in the first place. After all, the United States at this time did not recognize them as official citizens. Why would they sacrifice so much for a nation that did not yet call them its own. There are many reasons to fight, and some had different interwoven motivations. Obviously, all these men were fighting to end slavery. Those who were formerly enslaved or who still had family members who were enslaved were especially aware of the physical, psychological, and emotional damage the institution inflicted upon African Americans. They, as well as those who were born free men of color, also knew that their race could only progress so far without slavery being dismantled. Some also fought to preserve the Union and maintain a representative democratic form of government. And while certainly not without many flaws, they fully understand that the United States government and its laws were based on an amendable constitution that could eventually be changed for the better. Others saw their military service as an opportunity to prove themselves as men and deserving of citizenship. They knew they were worthy of citizenship and the guarantees of equal political and social rights, including voting, running for office, serving on juries, prosecuting legal claims and providing testimony against whites, educating their children, and starting their own churches and businesses. Perhaps the best known soldier from the Battle of New Market Heights is Sergeant Major Christian Fleetwood. Born in 1840 to free parents in Baltimore, Fleetwood earned both the Medal of Honor and the Army of the James Medal, which is also known as the Butler Medal. General Benjamin Butler felt that these men did such courageous deeds that 14 Medals of Honor were not enough, so he had his own medal struck. And you can see him wearing the round Butler Medal there on his coat, along with the Medal of Honor. Butler had almost 200 of these extra medals of his own struck and given to these soldiers that fought at New Market Heights. Fleetwood's history comes through a variety of sources, but in the 1860 census it lists him as a 19-year-old living with his parents, Charles Fleetwood, who was a 45-year-old waiter, and Maria, his mother, a 40-year-old housekeeper. Also listed in the family is Christian's 20-year-old older sister, Averick. And while the census noted that Maria, his mother, was not able to read and write, Christian is shown as having attended school. In fact, through the generosity of John Brune, a wealthy sugar merchant in Baltimore, who Charles Fleetwood worked for, and who saw Charles's potential, Christian received an education only hoped for by many free black people in Maryland. Christian graduated from Ashman Institute in Oxford, Pennsylvania in 1860. Ashman is the first degree granting historically black college and university, which later became Lincoln University and is still in operation today. Before enlisting, Christian had traveled to Liberia and Sierra Leone on Africa's western coast. At age 16, he had worked for an African-American newspaper called the Lyceum Observer in Baltimore, as well as worked for the Maryland Colonization Society. Oh, sorry. Christian enlisted in Company G of the 4th United States Colored Infantry on August 11, 1863 in Baltimore. His service records show us that he was 23 years old, 5 feet 4.5 inches tall, with a brown complexion, and holding the pre-war occupation of clerk. Christian's education, leadership skills, and self-confidence were obvious to his regimental officers almost immediately, as he was made sergeant upon joining and received promotion to sergeant major 8 days later. Almost 40,000 African American soldiers in the Union Army died during their service. The vast majority of those, like white soldiers, perished from disease. Christian seemingly lived a healthy and relatively accident-free Army life. Other than an illness in October of 1865 for an intermittent fever, he remained well. Christian also experienced good fortune in battle. Despite being in the thick of the fight in order to attack a fortified position in an unsupported battle line formation on September 29, 1864 at New Market Heights, Fleetwood and his 4th United States Colored Infantry comrades showed their steel will. Attacking the Confederate breastworks after navigating through battlefield obstacles, the 4th suffered over 50% casualties. Christian braved the storm of shot and shell, and he later recalled the battle's horror. He wrote, quote, "When the charge was started, our color guard was complete. Only one of the 12 came off the field on his feet. Early in the rush, one of the sergeants went down, a bullet cutting his flagstaff in two and passing through his body. It was a deadly hailstorm of bullets, sweeping men down as hailstones sweep the leaves from the trees, and it was not long before Sergeant Hilton also went down, shot through the leg. As he fell, he held up both the flags. Each regiment has a regimental flag and a United States flag. He was holding both of them when he went down. He shouted, "Boys, save the colors." Before they could touch the ground, Corporal Veal had seized the blue regimental flag and I the American flag. It was evident that there was too much work cut out for our two regiments. We struggled through the two lines of abattis, a few getting through to the earthworks, but it was sheer madness. And those of us who were able withdrew as best we could, unquote. Christian was amazed that he had survived. He remembered, quote, "I have never been able to understand how Veal and I lived under such a hail of bullets, unless it was because we were such both little fellows. I think I weighed about 125 pounds and Veal about the same. We did not get a scratch. A bullet passed between my legs, cutting my bootleg, trousers, and even my stocking without breaking the skin," unquote. For his bravery, Christian was awarded the Medal of Honor on April 6, 1865. Christian's 4th United States Colored Infantry comrades, Sergeant Alfred Hilton and Corporal Charles Veal, were also recognized for conspicuous gallantry with medals of honor. Christian's citation reads, quote, "He seized the colors after two color bearers had been shot down and bore them nobly through the fight," unquote. After the war, Christian worked for a time in Ohio as a bookkeeper. He moved to Washington, D.C. and married Sarah Iredale, a teacher born in Pennsylvania. Christian held clerical positions both inside and outside the federal government in the years following the conflict. Christian was also involved with the Washington Colored National Guard in the 1880s. In 1900, Christian, Sarah, and their 16-year-old daughter Edith lived on Spruce Street in Washington. Suffering from heart failure, Christian died on September 28, 1914, nearly 50 years to the day after he had braved the fire at Newmarket Heights. Sergeant Fleetwood was originally buried in Columbia and Harmony Cemetery in Washington, D.C., but when developers purchased the cemetery property, his remains and others were reinterred in 1959 in Harmony National Park Cemetery in Landover, Maryland. Corporal, later Sergeant Miles James' service records tell us that he was 34 years old when he enlisted on November 16, 1863 in Norfolk, which means he would have been born about 1829. He told his enrollment officer that he was born in Princess Anne County, which is present-day Virginia Beach. Although his service records note that he was a farmer, the 5'7" James was most probably born enslaved, likely remained so until he was able to make his way into Union lines during the Civil War. If he had gained his liberty before enlisting, how long he was free it probably is unknown. Admittedly and unfortunately, we know very little about Corporal James's life outside his military service. But his extraordinary courage at Newmarket Heights makes him particularly deserving of inclusion among those profiled here today. During the assault by Colonel Alonzo Draper's brigade, consisting of the 5th, the 36th, and the 38th United States Colored Infantries, Corporal James was shot in the left upper arm, breaking the bone. He did not seek immediate medical attention. Rather, he continued to load and fire his rifle with his right arm while cheering on his comrades. Immediately following the battle, surgeons amputated James's left arm, and he received transportation by boat to the military hospital at Fort Monroe to heal. While there recovering, he wrote to Colonel Draper. Draper, in turn, wrote to the head surgeon at the hospital in February of 1865. He wrote, quote, "Sergeant Miles James, Company B, 36th United States Colored Infantry, writes me from your hospital to urge that he may be permitted to remain in the service." He lost his left arm in charging upon Newmarket Heights, September 29, 1864. If it be possible, I would most respectfully urge that his request be granted. He was made a sergeant and awarded a civil medal by Major General Butler for gallant conduct. He is one of the bravest men I ever saw and is in every respect a model soldier. He is worth more with his single arm than half a dozen ordinary men. Being a sergeant, he will have little use to carry as a file closer to use a musket. He could be a sergeant of my provost guard or headquarter guard and could do full duty in many ways. If consistent with your view of duty, I shall be greatly obliged if you make it convenient to return him to his regiment. Sergeant Miles James did indeed return to service in April of 1865 while his regiment was on occupation duty at Petersburg. He served at Draper's headquarters and then transferred with the regiment to the Texas-Mexico border, where he received a disability discharge in October of 1865. He returned home to Virginia and settled in Norfolk with his family. Freedmen's Bureau records in 1869 note that Miles James was among those who were drawing rations from the government due to their disabilities. He is noted as having, quote, lost his left arm in service, unquote, and was a resident of Norfolk. The 1870 census shows Miles living in Norfolk and lists him as a shoemaker. He lived there with his wife Sarah, a housekeeper, their 15-year-old son John, and daughters Ella and Edith, 13 and 9 respectively. Unfortunately, Miles James died the year following due to complications from his Newmarket Heights wound on August 28, 1871. He was about 44 years old. Although Miles James has a cenotaph marker in Chesapeake, Virginia, unfortunately his exact place of burial is unknown. Like many of the Newmarket Heights black soldiers, Sergeant Major Thomas Hawkins' early years are largely a mystery. If it were not for a statement provided by his comrade and friend Christian Fleetwood in support of his widow Julia's efforts to receive a pension, we would know even less. Fleetwood shared that Hawkins was born in 1840 in Cincinnati, Ohio, but he did not know the exact date, which appears lost to history. Although Fleetwood does not give details as to why, he noted that, quote, at the outbreak of the war, Hawkins was in the South, where he remained until 1863, unable to get through to the northern lines, unquote. Fleetwood goes on to say that Hawkins, along with George Arnold and T.S. Kelly, both of who eventually served in the 4th United States Colored Infantry, quote, succeeded in making their escape and came to Baltimore, unquote. Why were Hawkins, Arnold, and Kelly in the South? Were they serving as scouts? Had they been serving in another capacity, such as Union Army camp servants, and been captured? No information to date has come to light to explain this mention by Fleetwood. Fleetwood first probably became acquainted with Hawkins due to them serving in the same rank in regiments that were in the same brigade. Although of similar age, the learned Fleetwood probably tutored the less educated Hawkins in processing the numerous paperwork forms that were a large part of the sergeant major's responsibility. Adding to the information in Fleetwood's account, Hawkins' service records tell us that he was 5'4.5" tall. He was a plasterer before the Civil War. He enlisted in the 6th United States Colored Infantry as a private on August 4th, 1863 in Philadelphia, serving as a substitute for Passmore Henry, a mixed-race Philadelphian who must have been drafted and did not want to serve. As a substitute, you usually received a payment from the person that you're substituting for, and it just depended on whatever you were able to negotiate. Within 2 weeks, Hawkins received a promotion to sergeant major of the regiment. Hawkins was wounded in the arm near the elbow on June 15, 1864, in the first attacks on Petersburg. He recuperated at Fort Monroe Hospital and then Balfour Hospital in Portsmouth, Virginia, for about 2 months before returning to his regiment August 13, 1864. During the Battle of Newmarket Heights, Hawkins and his regiment were in Colonel Samuel Duncan's brigade, along with the 4th United States Colored Infantry, and were in the first assault. During the fighting, he helped the wounded Lieutenant Nathan Edgerton save the regimental colors. In doing so, Hawkins was wounded in the upper thigh, hip area, shoulder, and foot, 3 wounds. The wound to his thigh caused, quote, permanent lameness, unquote, according to the attending surgeon. Fleetwood noted that Hawkins, quote, lay up on the field 3 hours before he was found and taken to the rear, unquote. Hawkins returned to Balfour Hospital for recovery and spent most of the rest of the war there. Fleetwood noted that Hawkins initially refused to leave the service as, quote, his whole heart and soul being in the cause for which he fought, unquote. Unable to perform his physical duties, Hawkins received a disability discharge on May 20th, 1865. Sergeant Hawkins was among the men who received the Butler Medal for conspicuous courage at Newmarket Heights. Fleetwood's account also explains that in 1866, Hawkins came to Washington, D.C., and through the help of General Benjamin Butler, received a job in the Internal Revenue Department, which he held until the date of his death. Hawkins did not receive the Medal of Honor on April 6, 1865, like the majority of his Newmarket Heights recipients, but following the war, he petitioned for the award and received it only 3 weeks before he died from tuberculosis on February 28, 1870, at age 30. Fleetwood ended his account of Hawkins by stating that, quote, he was a young man of remarkable natural ability and talent, brave to a fault, generous as a prince, a gallant soldier, an affectionate and true husband and father, a faithful friend. His death leaves a void in the hearts of his associates that will never be filled by another, unquote. Thomas's death left his two sons, 3-year-old Thomas and William, who would be born 6 months after Hawkins' death, fatherless. Like Fleetwood, Hawkins was originally buried in Columbian Harmony Cemetery in Washington, D.C., and later reinterred in National Harmony Park Cemetery in Landover, Maryland. Born enslaved in Austin, Texas, on August 1, 1844, Milton M. Holland was the son of a white man named Bird Holland and a woman named Matilda Unk, who was enslaved by Holland's brother. Milton also had 2 brothers fathered by Bird Holland. When Milton was a boy, his father purchased him and his brothers, and freeing them, sent them to Ohio to learn trades and receive an education. Milton was living in Athens, Ohio, when the Civil War broke out. Wanting to assist the Union cause, but unable to enlist due to his age and being mixed race, Milton eventually gained employment as a servant under Lieutenant Nelson H. Van Voorhees of the 3rd Ohio Infantry. When finally allowed to enlist, Milton joined the 5th United States Colored Infantry, a unit raised in Ohio, and although only 19 years old, he soon became first sergeant of Company C. His enlistment records state that he was 5 feet 8 inches tall. His complexion is described as yellow, and his pre-war occupation noted as shoemaker. Milton was reduced to ranks of private in the spring of 1864 after becoming discouraged about receiving unequal pay and expressing his dismay about it. However, by the summer of 1864, he was first sergeant again. Participating in raids in northeastern North Carolina and on the Virginia, York, and James River Peninsula, Milton gained invaluable experience in how to relate to and lead the men in his company. Seeing true combat for the first time on June 15, 1864, in the initial attacks on Petersburg, about 2 months later, Milton received a promotion to sergeant major, thus earning the highest rank possible at the time for most black soldiers. At the Battle of Newmarket Heights, Holland, although wounded, refused to leave the field and led his company, taking charge when several of the white officers were wounded. For his courageous efforts, he received the Butler Medal and the Medal of Honor. Soon after Newmarket Heights, Milton was examined for promotion to captain, a commissioned officer's rank. General Butler recommended the promotion, but the War Department prejudicially refused it due to Holland's race. Holland continued to serve the 5th as sergeant major until the end of the war, having participated in the Battle of Fort Fisher, North Carolina, and being present when General Johnston surrendered to General Sherman near Durham, North Carolina in April of 1865. After the war, Holland returned to Ohio, married and worked briefly again as a shoemaker. The Hollands moved to Washington, D.C. in 1969, and the following year, with the help of John Mercer Langston, Milton received a position with the Treasury Department. While in Washington, Milton studied law at Howard University, graduating in 1872. An active member of the Republican Party, Holland advocated for equal rights and opportunities for blacks. In the 1890s, he founded the Alpha Insurance Company in Washington, which was one of the earliest insurance companies in the nation owned and operated by an African American. He died from a heart attack on May 15, 1910, and was buried in Arlington National Cemetery. Leaving the rather well-known Newmarket Heights Medal of Honor recipients for a minute, let's take a look at one of the more anonymous of Newmarket Heights soldiers. I firmly believe that there's a great value in exploring the lives of even the commonest of common soldiers, the men who did not get special recognition and that do not normally receive scholarly attention. Henderson Taborn was born a free man of color in North Carolina about 1823. As the sectional divide deepened in the 2 decades before the Civil War, many free blacks decided to leave North Carolina and settle in Ohio. Oberlin, an abolitionist town in northern Ohio, was a popular place for them to settle. In fact, 2 of John Brown's raiders, John Copeland and Lewis Leary, were both immigrant North Carolinians who relocated to Oberlin. Henderson Taborn waited longer than Copeland and Leary to move north. As a skilled cabinet maker, perhaps Taborn had built up a customer base in North Carolina that he was somewhat reluctant to leave. However, as his home state increasingly strengthened its already stringent laws against free people of color, he and his family finally decided to relocate in either late 1860 or early 1861. Taborn was not one of the black men who enlisted at first opportunity. Perhaps being 40 years old by 1863 and having a rather large family to provide for caused his reluctance. Maybe he was discouraged by the unequal pay and the lack of advancement past sergeant major. Or possibly he had heard disheartening stories of Confederate atrocities against black soldiers, or that the United States colored troop soldiers captured in battle could be enslaved. Neither Taborn's service records nor his wife's pension application indicates that he was drafted or served as a substitute. Regardless of whatever prevented him from enlisting or whatever may have encouraged him to join, he finally signed up on September 1st, 1864 in Wooster, Ohio, 28 days before Newmarket Heights. Probably taking several different forms of transportation to reach the camp of the 5th USCI, he made it there just in time to participate in the battle. It's obvious that Private Taborn had little, or received little, if any, significant training for what he would soon face. Travel time from Wooster, Ohio to the war's front in central Virginia took at least a week, if not 2. Taborn probably had little opportunity to make any real acquaintance with his comrades, learn to cook his hardtack and salt pork, boil coffee Army style, get his brogans or new uniform broke in, or even get familiar with loading his rifle before the 5th USCI received its next combat assignment, Newmarket Heights. Despite his inexperience, Private Taborn joined the attack. Scattered on the ground before the enemy earthworks, the casualties of the 5th, who lost about half of their men, included newly minted soldier Private Henderson Taborn. It is unknown at what point in the attack life left his body, but Lieutenant Colonel Giles Shirtliff, who commanded the regiment that day, and Lieutenant James Marsh, the regimental quartermaster, provided affidavits for the pension claim of Taborn's wife Minerva. They explained that they heard about Taborn's death from 2 of his comrades who saw Taborn lying dead on the battlefield. Likely buried on the place or near where he fell, as was the common practice, it is unknown if Private Taborn was among those soldiers later reinterred in one of the area's national cemeteries, or if his remains are still on the Newmarket Heights battlefield. First Sergeant Powhatan Beatty was born into slavery in Richmond on October 8, 1837. One period source claims that Beatty was the son of a white former Virginia Attorney General. It is not clear how he gained his freedom. It may have been a situation similar to that of Milton Holland. Regardless, around 1850, Beatty relocated to Cincinnati, Ohio. Unlike Virginia, Ohio did not criminalize education for blacks, and thus Beatty had the opportunity to gain a formal education. It was at school that Beatty first experienced the world of theater and acting, an interest that would remain with him for the rest of his life. Making a living on the stage anywhere in the United States before the Civil War was uncommon for black men. So he learned the craft of cabinet making and woodworking as he continued to hone his acting skills, performing for African American audiences in Cincinnati and surrounding towns when possible. Beatty's first taste of serving his country came in the fall of 1862, when Confederates invaded Kentucky. Beatty was one of Cincinnati's Black Brigade, men of color who Cincinnati's mayor conscripted to build defenses for the city. However, less than a year later, on June 7, 1863, the 25-year-old Beatty voluntarily joined the United States Colored Troops in Cincinnati. His enlistment records state that he was 5 feet 7 inches tall, of brown complexion, with a pre-war occupation of turner, a skilled woodworker. Beatty received appointment as sergeant at his enlistment and was promoted to first sergeant 2 days later. The regiment Beatty joined was originally known as the 127th Ohio Volunteer Infantry, but soon received the designation as the 5th United States Colored Infantry. Following a period of recruiting to fill the regiment and completing its training, the 5th United States Colored Infantry transferred to southeastern Virginia. There they led raids into northeastern North Carolina and southeastern Virginia, freeing hundreds of enslaved people. They participated in their first real battle at Petersburg on June 15, 1864, where they fought extremely well. By the fall of 1864, Beatty's company and regiment formed an important part of a brigade and division of United States Colored Troops in the 18th Corps of the Army of the James. Ordered to lead a second assault at Newmarket Heights on the morning of September 29, 1864, Beatty and the 5th steadied their nerves. During the desperate fighting, Beatty performed several heroic acts, including rallying his company when the attack stalled at obstacles placed by the Confederates for that exact purpose. Regaining their momentum, Beatty's regiment and his comrades in the other 2 regiments pushed forward, driving the famous Texas Brigade from their earthwork positions. The 5th United States Colored Infantry suffered the highest casualties in Colonel Alonzo Draper's brigade, losing about half of its officers and soldiers either killed, wounded, or missing. The victory was hard-earned, but a victory it was. For his bravery, Beatty received recognition with a Butler Medal. In addition, he was one of the 12 United States Colored Troop soldiers at Newmarket Heights that were awarded the Medal of Honor on April 6, 1865. 2 other Newmarket Heights African-American soldiers received Medals of Honor after the war, making 14 in total. Following the war, Beatty returned to Cincinnati. The 1870 census shows him living with his wife Mary and their infant son Albert. Beatty's occupation is listed as cabinet maker, but he also continued to perform on stage, and he sought out public speaking opportunities to hone his acting skills. By the 1870s, Beatty had become a well-known actor in local theaters, and he directed music and drama presentations throughout the city. In 1884, Beatty teamed with black actress Henrietta Vinton Davis, and the 2 began touring Shakespearean plays such as Richard III and Macbeth being their specialty. In fact, the Colored Patriot, a black newspaper, noted about Beatty on May 3, 1864 in their newspaper, quote, Mr. Powhatan Beatty's rendering of Spartacus was a gracious surprise. It had been some time since we heard that gentleman, but we were not prepared for the evidence of study and cultivation he manifested. All the emotions of the piece were depicted upon his countenance. Powerfully built, rugged and strong in his general appearance, he looked every inch a Roman gladiator. The audience leaned forward and eagerly listened to catch every word of his impassioned delivery. And when he finished, they fell back in their seats with a sigh of relief that plainly expressed how they had been affected. Mr. Beatty is indeed a grand artist and has wisely selected the tragic muse for the shrine of his artistic devotion, unquote. First Sergeant Powhatan Beatty died on September 6, 1916 in Cincinnati, Ohio at age 79. He rests in peace at Union Baptist Cemetery in Cincinnati. Today, First Sergeant Beatty is honored in Richmond with a memorial bridge near where he fought at Newmarket Heights. Corporal Obadiah Twyford was born in Virginia about 1839. The first public record for Twyford appears to be the 1850 census, listed as residing in Moyamensing, Ward 2, South Philadelphia, with his father, William Twyford, a seaman, and his mother, Sarah, and brothers Andrew and William. Obadiah was the middle child. Interestingly, the 1850 census lists all members of the Twyford family as being born in Pennsylvania. However, since Obadiah stated in his enlistment records that he was born in Virginia, the information they provided on the census may have been an effort for the Twyfords to cover their tracks if they had fled enslavement in the Old Dominion and relocated to Philadelphia. At the time of the census recording in 1850, the revised and strengthened fugitive slave law was a hotly debated topic, Congress passed it, making it federal law about a month after Obadiah's family provided their information to the census taker. Although neither Obadiah nor his family appeared in a search of the 1860 census, a few years before that census, he experienced a life-changing event. He became a father. After learning of Obadiah's death at Newmarket Heights, Hannah Hopkins Twyford, his wife, detailed in her pension application that she and Obadiah had a daughter named Anna Louisa, who was born on January 28, 1857. The information in Hannah's pension application file also states that she and Obadiah lived together for about 7 years before he enlisted, which coincides with the time of their daughter's birth. Enlisting on January 10, 1864 in Waterford, Camden County, New Jersey, Obadiah stated that he was 25 years old. He was a little under average height at 5'3" with a black complexion and curly hair. The former laborer officially became a United States soldier when he formally mustered into the 22nd United States Colored Infantry at Camp William Penn in Philadelphia. But less than a month later, on February 6th, he deserted. It's speculation to guess what truly happened, but records give a clue as to what may have occurred to prompt Obadiah's desertion. In Hannah's pension file, there is a signed affidavit from Reverend Joshua Eddy of the Bethel Church in Philadelphia stating that he performed the marriage of Obadiah and Hannah on February 7th, 1864, the day after Obadiah deserted. Did Obadiah seek formal permission from his officers to get married and receive rejection? Did he fear punishment for taking leave without approval and thus not immediately return? Did Obadiah feel a pressing need to formalize his common law relationship with Hannah in case he was killed or died of disease in the army? After all, marriage would provide benefits for his wife and young daughter should something happen to him. We simply do not know his true motivation for deserting. Obadiah's service records state that he was apprehended on February 15, 1864 in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Whatever the true situation, Obadiah apparently resolved it to his officers' satisfaction because records indicate that they reinstated him without trial or loss of pay. However, he was charged for transportation to catch up with his regiment. Obadiah rejoined the 22nd United States Colored Infantry at Fort Magruder near Yorktown, Virginia on March 8, 1864, and was reinstated to the company muster rolls by verbal order from the regimental headquarters on April 19th. Alongside the 4th, the 5th, and the 6th United States Colored Infantry, the 22nd fought well June 15, 1864 at Petersburg, where they actually captured an artillery piece. Twyford received promotion to corporal on June 1, 1864. Not part of the formal assaults of Duncan and Draper's brigade at Newmarket Heights, the 22nd United States Colored Infantry skirmished on the left of Colonel Draper's attack column. In doing so, the 22nd, quote, negotiated a dense tangle of underbrush and felled trees, unquote, and emerged into a cleared area. Quote, here, the first line of the enemy's pickets was encountered, who were stationed across the plain in a piece of woods, unquote, Captain Albert James explained in his official report. Several of the men fell as casualties at this time, but the Confederate main defense line was still ahead with, quote, an abattis in front. Then, as the charging column came up to support the skirmish line, a part of the regiment assembled and moved forward into the works, driving the enemy in confusion from them, unquote. Sometime during the fighting, Corporal Twyford fell killed. Obadiah's Company G suffered the majority of the casualties in the regiment, with one killed, being Corporal Twyford, one fatally wounded, and 12 wounded who survived. A condolence letter sent to Hannah Twyford by Company G's Captain Charles F. Eichhacker gives some details of Obadiah's battlefield death. Written on October 18, 1864, Eichhacker penned, quote, the mournful duty devolves upon me to break to you the news of your husband's death. He died the death of a soldier while gallantly charging on the rebel rifle pits on our front near Deep Bottom, Virginia, September 29, 1864. He was struck by a rebel ball and died instantly without struggle. This will indeed be sad news to you, but such is the lot of soldiers, and there will be some consolation if he and thousands of others have not laid down their lives for their country's cause in vain. May you find strength to bear your personal loss." Unquote. Ike Hacker also left a postscript. Quote, "Enclosed, please find your letter to your deceased husband. I was under the necessity of opening it to ascertain the whereabouts of his relatives." Unquote. A copy of Hannah's letter to Obadiah that Ike Hacker returned to her is unfortunately not included in the pension papers. She probably wanted to keep that for herself. Anything that these people sent in to prove as evidence to the pension department was never returned to them. The location of Corporal Tryford's grave, unfortunately, is not known. These are just a mere handful of soldier stories told in an attempt to remember the service and sacrifice of the men who fought at the Battle of Newmarket Heights. A look through their service records of those wounded and mortally wounded shows how terribly they suffered. A few of the wounds documented in their service records are amputation of left leg at thigh, gunshot wound to left pelvis hip bone, gunshot wound of left shoulder, gunshot wound perforating left lung, amputation of right knee joint, amputation of left arm and left thigh, gunshot wound through breast. And this one's just for this one soldier. Gunshot wound fracture of right radius and gunshot wound of right thigh, and gunshot wound of right knee, and gunshot wound to flesh of back. That's all from one soldier. Next soldier, wounds to the head, arm, and side. Next soldier, amputation of right thigh. Their service and sacrifice helped win the Battle of Newmarket Heights. In turn, the Battle of Newmarket Heights, along with the fall of Atlanta and the victories in the Shenandoah Valley that autumn of 1864, helped President Lincoln win re-election, which of course played a huge part in winning the Civil War. Due in large part to the United States colored troop soldiers who fought at Newmarket Heights, their willingness to brave the dangers of the battlefield and the perils of camp life, changes to the Constitution did indeed come. The 13th Amendment, which made slavery illegal, the 14th Amendment, which granted citizenship, and the 15th Amendment, which gave black men the right to vote, all helped move the United States toward becoming a more perfect union. I thank them, and I thank you for being here today to learn about them. Thank you. Be happy to take any questions that anyone may have.
Give us your mark, and then
Could you tell us a little bit more about Butler?
About what?
Butler.
Butler.
Yes.
Butler's a very interesting gentleman. He was a pre-war attorney in Massachusetts, very conservative in his early career, even as a general. He was first stationed in Fort Monroe, Virginia, and he passed an order which became known as the Contraband Order when 3 enslaved men from the Confederate Army who were working on defenses made their way to Fort Monroe, and their owner asked for them back. Butler said, or he reasoned, lawyer-like, that since Virginia had seceded, the fugitive slave law was no longer in effect. So he's not going to return them. They were now considered contraband of war. And that really starts setting this slow evolution toward emancipation. Congress passes the first Confiscation Act, second Confiscation Act in 1862. Congress passes the Militia Act, which authorizes the president to enlist black men if he wishes. And then finally the Emancipation Proclamation, which goes into effect on January 1st, 1863, does formally start enlisting black men officially in the Union Army. So Butler's very interesting. He got shipped after serving at Fort Monroe. He got shipped to New Orleans, and he offended a lot of people in New Orleans because he passed another order that said if the white women of New Orleans kept mistreating his officers, they were to be treated as women of the evening, basically calling them prostitutes. He also had some issues with apparently his brother doing some corrupt things that got put onto him probably unfairly. But he comes back to Virginia They create the Army of the James. He leads the Army of the James. He's not mistaken as a Grant or a Lee as far as his general abilities, but his orders for the Battle of New Market Heights and the attack on Fort Harrison are written great, and the plan works off. Both of them are victories. The Confederates have to fall back closer to Richmond. They don't capture Richmond, which is the goal of the battle, but they do push them back further, and they do make attempts at Petersburg to get gains as well. So it's a successful offensive. He gets eventually cashiered from the Army because he tries to take Fort Fisher, North Carolina by sending a barge full of gunpowder up to it to blow it up, and it doesn't work. And they use that kind of as an excuse to get rid of him. But he becomes a congressman after the war, and he works to continue to pass civil rights in recognition of what he saw these black soldiers sacrificed at New Market Heights. He says that in his speech time after time again. If I do anything, it's to promote the civil rights these men have earned on the battlefield. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
A question concerning the retirement or the compensation the soldiers got after the war. Did they get the given pension, or was it only for the wives?
So the soldiers themselves, if they were killed or died of disease during the war, their wives got their pension, or their descendants, their children, their dependents. Congress eventually passes pensions for everybody if you served, whether you were disabled or not. But originally they were meant to take care of the families, or if you were wounded or disabled because of fighting. But eventually all the soldiers get pensions. Was
there a distinction between the colored soldiers and the white soldiers as far as what they received?
No. During the war, they eventually equalized pay between white and black soldiers. If you were free before April of 1861, they continued to discriminate against previously enslaved black soldiers after that. But there is a lot of hoops that they have to make people jump through to get pensions, though, especially the wives of black soldiers who were killed. They have to provide things that just weren't available to them, like marriage certificate. If they didn't have a marriage certificate, they had to find the minister who performed the ceremony and get an affidavit. If they couldn't find him, they had to find 2 or 3 other people that could vouch for them that they were married or at least living in a common law relationship. So they made these black women who were widows of black soldiers jump through a lot of hoops to get these pensions. It was really unfair. The government was trying to do everything they could to not give out money. Yeah.
I know that Harriet Tubman did lead troops in the Civil War. She never got a pension. And maybe other women who were, some women did enlist dressed as men. I don't know if they got pension.
Yeah, there's really sort of, women didn't formally serve as soldiers, but we assume that there were some black women who did serve as soldiers that disguised themselves like white women did to serve in white regiments. Who they were and what they did, I've not seen really any good stories or letters left or anything that provides a whole lot of evidence of who they were, but we assume that there probably were some. And as far as their efforts to get a pension, I'm not sure about that. That's a very interesting question, would be some great research to do. Stuart?
Yeah. How much of the New Market Heights battlefield is preserved?
So that's a great question. Fortunately, the core battlefield at New Market Heights is preserved by Henrico County, and it's going to eventually be turned into a park. They're working on a trail system now that goes from Deep Bottom Landing down on the James River up to the site of the battle, where people can learn about the battle through waysides and things like that. Right now, it's not yet open to the public to come on to. The American Battlefield Trust has also saved property there, and another organization down in Richmond called the Capital Region Land Conservancy, which mainly focuses on environmental conservancy, has also purchased land around it as well. So they're trying to spread it as much as possible for us to tell this story to a larger audience. Our organization, the Battle of New Market Heights Memorial and Education Association, what we're trying to do is raise funds to create a monument on the battlefield for these brave soldiers. There's nothing there telling basically what they did other than a silver highway marker a little bit further up the road on Highway 5. So what we're trying to do is really honor these guys in perpetuity for future generations to to gain their inspiration. These men died for all Americans and the future of our country, so they deserve some tribute. If you're interested in supporting our effort, we do have a website. I've got some information on a flyer. We're selling copies of my friend and fellow board member Jimmy Price's book on Newmarket Heights for $20 a copy. If you'd like to buy a copy today, just see me and I'll take care of you with that. So, any other questions? I really appreciate your time today, and thank
you. Tim, before you go away, I am going to pose this question to you, having to do with preservation again. What do you know about the progress of the Battlefield Coalition's lawsuit against the Orange County Board, having to do with the Wilderness Crossing development?
So the case that the plaintiffs are making, which is the American Battlefield Trust, ourselves, a couple of private citizens, and the Friends of the Wilderness Battlefield as well, are going to be able to have a hearing in March with the judge. So we're finally getting our day in court, and we'll see whether he's going to rule whether we have standing or not. And I think there is enough evidence there, according to the attorney that is serving the plaintiffs, that there should be plenty of evidence for standing that that they didn't follow the correct procedures to do the rezoning that they did. So we're hoping that the judge agrees with our attorney and the evidence that he has compiled. So we think there's a good case there, and we'll see from there. We're all hoping.
Jim, that's on March 21st, and it's 1:30 in the afternoon, and we're encouraged to attend. They want a large show of people supporting the dissidents, if you will.
Well, I know a lot of individuals from this community turned out for the town meetings when they were considering rezoning, and we certainly appreciate that show of force in trying to keep our area, historic resources as well as our environment, in good shape. So thank you very much for participating in those.
Thanks, Tim, and thanks, Bob, for mentioning that. So this is going to take place 1:30
It's scheduled for 1:30.
at the Orange County Courthouse.
Yep.
This is a trial or
It's a
a
new hearing, which means they're against whatever the subject is.
Yeah, and this is before David Franzen, Judge David Franzen. So if you are interested in going, as I am, you could keep track of that. If there are any changes, the clerk of the court should be able to inform you about that. Okay, well, as I said, we have an embarrassment of riches today, I think. I really wish that Charles Brewer had been able to be here as well, since his research that he revealed to us about the United States colored troops that were in our immediate area at the Battle of the Wilderness is a subject of his research, and he's done much of the detailing that parallels Tim's presentation here about those men who sacrificed themselves and showed such valor at Newmarket Heights. This is I didn't know that Benjamin Butler had a medal struck in honor of this battle, but this is considered to be his sort of one and only successful battlefield operation, and it's largely because of the sacrifice of these men who initiated this attack. One brigade, about 1,500 to 2,000 men maybe, in the colored infantry that attacked well-prepared fortifications against the Texas Brigade, one of the Confederacy's outstanding battlefield units, and suffering those kinds of, this is unbelievable 50, 60% casualty rates, and they just fought on. They continued, they came back. They had to withdraw for a while, and they came back again. And it's amazing. But we have an opportunity to hear a little bit about one of our residents' ancestors. Jim,
Over here.
are you? Oh, there you are. Okay. Has things here for us, and this is a photograph of Joseph Franklin Carter, Major Joseph Franklin Carter, your great-grandfather.
My great-grandfather, which I found out.
That's the good of doing a little bit of research like that. By the way, I should have mentioned too, when I was talking to Tim yesterday, he said that today is the 3rd anniversary of his coming to the Central Virginia Battlefields Trust. So we're glad he's been here for 3 years, and hope he stays for a lot longer, or as long as he wants to too. Glad to have him here. Yeah. Okay, we got you sort of suited up?
Yeah.
Okay, put it in your pocket, but don't walk out of here with it. I'll get in trouble. Well, you can put,
I mean, is it working?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
you betcha. We'll hear you.
This is, I'll talk to you about my ancestors, but I don't know, this is heavy, but if you've never seen one sword, I mean, if you were 5'4" in those days, it'd be like those cartoons. You want to pass that around, please don't open it.
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
So this is his actual
Yeah.
battlefield sword.
He was
Field officer.
Yeah, well, he was in the cavalry. Yeah, so, just take care of his. Also, I will be honest with you, my mother, who passed away last year, she was 98, and I'll explain where she comes in, but, I was always thought he was my great uncle. But I went through the information from, she kept a real detailed genealogy. He's actually my great-grandfather. So, also I have a picture of him when he was 15, pass that around, and a picture, 2 pictures here, the same one of in a uniform. And this one here shows him as a child. So you want to pass that
Where
around.
did you get the pictures?
My mother picked them up from somewhere, and God knows what, she was always picking up something. We don't know where the medal is, we've tried, but I was thinking today, he might be buried with it.
Oh.
So, he's in Arlington, and the one thing that's, something that you really look at as to how they honor them is that's his headstone. It's not like a cross you see, or the white ones you see. The Medal of Honor winners have these big ones. That's brown granite. So he is at Arlington Cemetery. Anyway.
And his wife, it also, the inscription, which I know you cannot see, also mentions that his wife, it mentions his wife, is she actually buried there as well?
Yeah, her name was Mary Jane Latchford before they married. And
Mary Jane Carter.
I have the information here, and basically, he was born September 11, 1837, and he married his wife, Mary Jane Latchford. At the time, I think he was, 20, he was in his 20s. But he's listed as a captain, but in those days, with everybody, I guess, being killed, he was promoted to a brevet major. And that means that you're acting major, but you don't get any money. Same thing today. So, anyway, his date of birth, September 11, 1837, he was born in Howard County, Maryland. And they have him here as he was a politician. He was a Republican, and he served in the Maryland 5th. I really didn't hear too much about him right now, but as I say, my mother had all this stuff, and we just started going through the stuff last year, and it's remarkable what she had had made up. I'll break something before I leave or steal something. But basically, when he was married, he had 6 children. And the youngest of 6 children was Walter Shirley Carter. And in those days, Shirley was a man's name, it wasn't a woman's name. And he was a good poet, and he's actually my mother's father. And that's how the line, the line came down. And I think what you've heard today is if you don't have these talks and stuff, it just fades from history. So we probably should have been more up and down, but we all all of us were in the military. My father was a chief petty officer. My oldest brother, Joseph, he served in the Navy, and my father was also on the USS Intrepid. That's up in New York, the aircraft carrier, when it was launched. And my brother was on it when it was decommissioned, so that shows you how things go. I am an identical twin, and I'm the eldest. I can prove it because I have this toe mark on my butt. I came up first. But in those days, I was rated A1. I guess that's the same as they do me today, but that means that you were actually going into the service. You were inducted to the service. You were drafted. And I decided, well, if I go in regularly, I got to serve 4 years, but if I'm drafted, I only have to serve 2. So I went into the Army. Didn't sit well with my father, since my older brother was already in the Navy. So, so anyway, he drove me down to get on the bus to go down to Fort Bragg to get inducted. And I got out and I went around the back and I got my little duffel bag out of the trunk and I turned around to say goodbye, and his car was already out of the parking lot. He didn't talk to me for 2 years. So then my younger brother, which is my twin brother, that's Walter, he said, well, he got mad, so he joined the Air Force. That didn't work out either. Now my younger brother came along, and he retired as a commander, the gun boss for the USS Theodore Roosevelt. And you know what happened? He was just a wonder boy, so that's the way it is. But anyway, I know I don't want to sit there all day long and talk to you, but I just brought this up. Apparently in June 4th, 1922, he got something from the War Department. And the War Department basically said that he got a pension of $100. Wow. And the reason I got this is because we had good Christian people those days, because he died and they returned $100 back to the War Department. And that's why I have the document, and you can look at that. But I'm grateful that people like you and the people here, especially those fighting for what's going across Route 3, that they are preserving things. And the fact is that, if you like, I just turned 78, so I'm getting up there. The family doesn't want the sword. If you like, I'll donate it to you, and you can decide what to do with it.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, really, as long as the family gets something that says you accepted it. But I talked to the wife today, and she said, well, except for being in the case, nobody else in the family wants it. So I think maybe that's where it should go back to Petersburg, if you could.
Yeah, that might be the best place for it.
Yeah,
Petersburg National Battlefield.
That's where it scraped the ground, or on a horse. So, that's where it should go. Really, it should be part of history, not stuck away somewhere in an attic. So, yes, ma'am.
Now, you said he was your mother's father. That would make him your grandfather, not your great-grandfather.
Well, according to this, he's my great-grandfather, because Mom never lied.
Your mother's grandfather.
Well, let's see. I tell you what, since I found this out last night, let's figure this out, okay? Joseph F. Carter, we'll put him up top, okay? And his children, my grandfather was Walter Shirley Carter, okay? And my mother is his daughter, and I'm her son. So what does that make us? great grandfather. Yeah.
That's right. So you got.
I got it right, because that, mom's not right, man. Mom was right to the day she died. I mean, I grew up in a Navy family, and every 2 years, we could break the whole house down in 45 minutes to move. That's how it was. So, I really appreciate you inviting me today.
Thank you so much for coming and for bringing these artifacts from your family. I was noticing too that on the grave marker in Arlington, it says that your father was born in 1842, and you say 1837, so he would have been 85 years old when he passed away.
Well, if you look at one of the pictures,
I believe you.
on the pictures, even the date that they put it down is wrong. I had to change it because they was actually born in 1837. So things, as I say, this is one woman who took it upon herself to go back and do things and look up things and talk. She had in her family there was 13 children, and 5 of them died of tuberculosis. But she was picking things out and putting them in this box. And last year, we're going through her things, and it's true. You come into the world with nothing, and you leave with nothing, and that's about basically all she had left was that box. But she fought us all the way to. I was still 12 years old for a lot of years. I love it here. I've been here 21 years. So
Well, thank you so much again.
I want my sword back.
Exactly.
Before you go, please remember to visit our website often, civilwarstudygroup.org. We make every attempt on a regular basis to provide informative content. Thank you for visiting, and God bless.